Hello brains! On this channel we talk a lot about ADHD. For obvious reasons. But most of us don't just have ADHD. It's complicated. According to our How to ADHD dictionary, complex ADHD, noun, is ADHD and. ADHD and what? Yes. ADHD can come with many different co-occurring conditions, or comorbidities, such as anxiety, depression, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, autism, trauma, and a lot more. These comorbidities can mask our ADHD, exacerbate our ADHD, even impact how we respond to treatment. Hence, complex ADHD. Complex ADHD is more complicated to recognize and to treat effectively, but it's even more important to treat it, because long-term outcomes are understandably worse for those of us who have multiple mental health conditions, especially if one or more of them go untreated, which they often do. I did a survey recently on this channel. I asked how many people received a different mental health diagnosis before their ADHD diagnosis. The answer surprised me. Over half of them had, which meant over half of them weren't being treated for their ADHD. And to clarify, generally speaking, the ADHD does come first. ADHD can also get recognized while other conditions get missed. The reason I was evaluated in the first place was my ADHD symptoms were more obvious after I experienced a traumatic event. But I was only treated for my ADHD. No one even really talked to me about the trauma until like a few years ago, which was 25 years later. It can go either way. Sometimes the ADHD gets missed or goes untreated, and sometimes the co-occurring conditions do, which is not good because optimal treatment often requires treating both conditions simultaneously. That's not to say that there aren't times that one of our mental health conditions needs to be treated first. There are. But if one or more of our mental health conditions isn't being recognized or even considered as a possibility, it's entirely possible that our treatment plan won't be optimal for us or could even make things worse. Treating anxiety without treating the underlying ADHD, for example, can worsen the ADHD symptoms if we'd learn to count on that anxiety to help us hit deadlines or inhibit our impulsivity. And treating depression without addressing the underlying ADHD is often ineffective if it's not treating the root cause of it. Treating my ADHD without ever addressing my trauma was a challenge because I kept impulsively repeating patterns that reenacted that trauma, which made my ADHD-related emotional dysregulation way harder to deal with than it otherwise would have been. So it's important that our mental health providers recognize when we have complex ADHD and understand how to treat it, or at least are aware of how common it is for us to have a comorbid condition. Because mental health providers tend to treat the presenting problem, whatever our immediate concern is, it's important for us and them to know to look beyond that in those of us with ADHD. Because for us, having a comorbid condition isn't really the exception. It's almost the rule. Some of the most commonly diagnosed comorbid disorders in children are learning disabilities, anxiety, depression, and autism. And children with ADHD are 5 times more likely to die by suicide than their neurotypical peers. Adults with ADHD are even more likely to have one or more co-occurring conditions, with the most common being anxiety or trauma disorders, mood disorders, and substance use disorders. Quick note, while those with ADHD are twice as likely to have a substance use disorder as their neurotypical peers, treating the ADHD can actually help, because we're less likely to self-medicate. Concerns about addiction shouldn't be a reason not to treat it. In fact, it's a reason we should. Check out this video on medication I did for more information on that. Because these co-occurring conditions impact our ADHD, optimal treatment for ADHD is going to depend on our co-occurring conditions. Thankfully, there's new guidance out for children and adolescents about this. I'll link to it in the description below, but it's really comprehensive. It even takes into consideration conditions such as socioeconomic status, like poverty, and how well someone responds to medication. Again, these are the official guidelines for children and adolescents, but multiple clinicians I spoke to said that a lot of it can be extrapolated to adults as well. And I've also linked to some research on treating ADHD and comorbidities in adults specifically. Personally, treating my trauma had a huge impact on my functionality. I'm more cognizant about how my trauma affects me and how to put healthy boundaries for myself in place that help with that impulsivity. I'm also able to cope with my emotions more effectively when they come up, which means I'm way less emotionally dysregulated. I'm looking forward to seeing specific guidelines be developed for complex ADHD in adults. For those of us who, it's a little too late for us to be, treated as children. In the meantime, what's important for us and our treatment providers to know, complex ADHD is more common than ADHD alone, and it's important for a treatment plan to consider all the conditions involved, as well as how they impact each other and our ability to stick to that treatment plan. If you'd like to learn more about ADHD and other definitions, check out our definitions playlist here, and let me know if there's an ADHD-related term that you'd like me to define. Thank you to my brain advocates and all my Patreon brains for helping me put together this list of common definitions so that we know what it is that we're dealing with and have language for dealing with it. Like, subscribe, click all the things, and I will see you next video. Bye, brains!